Dad. The word escaped my lips before I could stop myself. The millionaire turned, our eyes locked, and then his gaze dropped to my shoulder. I'd never seen a grown man turn so pale. His coffee cup crashed to the floor, but he didn't even notice. That birthmark, he whispered, reaching toward me with trembling hands. It's impossible. Everyone in the cafe was staring now, but I couldn't move. After 15 years in the foster system, had I just accidentally found my father serving coffee to the man who abandoned me? I'd spent my entire life wondering why I was left at that shelter when I was just 3 years old. The social workers told me all they knew, that a young woman had dropped me off with nothing but a worn teddy bear and a small silver music box. She'd been crying, they said, but refused to leave her name or any contact information. She just kept saying, "I'm sorry," over and over. Mrs. Jenkins had told me on my 10th birthday when I'd begged for any scrap of information about where I came from. That music box became my most treasured possession, with its delicate melody that sometimes haunted my dreams. I'd turn the tiny key and pretend my real family was out there somewhere, thinking of me. Growing up in the system wasn't always terrible. There were kind foster families mixed in with the indifferent ones. The Millers even wanted to adopt me when I was 7, but something fell through with the paperwork, and next thing I knew, I was being moved again. That's how it always went. Just when I'd start to feel settled, just when I'd allow myself to care, I'd be packing my small suitcase again. By the time I turned 16, I'd learned to keep to myself, to never unpack completely, to always be ready to leave. The birthmark on my shoulder, a crescent moon shape that everyone said looked just like a smile, became my only constant companion, the only part of me that was truly mine. When I aged out of the system at 18, I felt both terrified and relieved. No more being shuffled around, but also no more safety net. I found a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls and got a job serving coffee at the Daily Grind, a cafe frequented by business people from the financial district. My manager, Ellie, took me under her wing, showing me how to make the perfect cappuccino and teaching me to never be intimidated by the suits who sometimes treated us like we were invisible. "Remember, honey," she'd say with a wink, "you might be serving them coffee today, but you're smart enough to be running their companies tomorrow." I'd laugh it off, but secretly, her confidence in me meant everything. That fateful morning started like any other, the usual rush of customers, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clinking of cups. I wasn't even supposed to be working that shift, but Ellie had called in sick, so I'd agreed to cover. The cafe was packed when he walked in, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in what I now know was a bespoke suit worth more than my yearly salary. He ordered a simple black coffee with a distracted air, his attention focused on his phone. I'd served hundreds of men like him before, but something made me look twice. There was something familiar about the shape of his eyes, the way he nodded slightly when he said thank you. Still, I would have handed him his coffee and forgotten him entirely if he hadn't turned at precisely the wrong, or perhaps right moment. "That birthmark, it can't be," he repeated, louder this time. The cafe had gone eerily quiet. I tugged at my sleeve, suddenly conscious that my uniform had slipped, revealing the crescent moon on my shoulder. "Sir, your coffee," I stammered, not knowing what else to say. But he wasn't looking at the shattered cup on the floor. His eyes were fixed on my face now, searching as if trying to solve a puzzle. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Emma," I replied. "Emma Lawrence." It was the name I'd been given at the shelter. The man staggered slightly, grabbing the counter for support. "Lawrence," he echoed. Of course they would use that name. I didn't understand what was happening, but a strange feeling was creeping up my spine. The manager appeared beside me, concerned by the commotion. "Is everything all right, Mr. Richardson?" she asked, and I realized with a jolt that I recognized that name. Richardson Enterprises owned half the buildings in the financial district, including the one where our cafe was located. This wasn't just any wealthy customer. This was William Richardson, one of the richest men in the city. "I need to speak with this young woman," he said, his composure returning slightly. "Privately." My manager looked uncertainly between us. "Emma? Is that okay?" I nodded, though my heart was racing. What could this man possibly want with me? Was I in trouble somehow? As we moved to a quiet corner table, I noticed his hands were still trembling. 15 years ago, he began without preamble, my wife disappeared with our 3-year-old daughter. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the pain beneath it. There was a birthmark, exactly like yours, on my daughter's left shoulder. Her name was Emma. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I'd imagined finding my family so many times, played out countless scenarios in my mind, but nothing like this. That's not possible, I whispered, though a part of me already knew it was true. I was left at Lawrence Children's Shelter. I don't have parents. Mr. Richardson, was he really my father? Pulled out his wallet with unsteady fingers and extracted a worn photograph. A little girl with my eyes smiled back at me, seated on a woman's lap. I could just make out the edge of a crescent-shaped birthmark peeking from beneath her sleeve. Your mother, Catherine G. He paused, pain flickering across his face. We were having problems. I worked too much, wasn't home enough. She threatened to leave, take you with her, but I never thought. He trailed off, and I found myself filling in the blanks. A desperate mother, a child she couldn't care for alone, a shelter with a reputation for finding good homes. The music box, I said suddenly. I still have a small silver music box. It plays a lullaby. Mr. Richardson's face transformed, hope and grief battling for dominance. I gave that to you on your 2nd birthday, he said softly. Your mother said it was silly to give such an expensive gift to a toddler, but you loved it so much. I thought of the little box, carefully wrapped in my scarf in my apartment drawer, the only link to my past. Now here was another link, sitting across from me, looking at me like I was a ghost made flesh. The next few hours passed in a blur. Mr. Richardson Williams, my father, canceled all his meetings. We moved from the cafe to a private room at an upscale restaurant nearby, where he ordered food that neither of us touched. He called his lawyer, who arrived within 20 minutes, looking bewildered but efficiently taking notes. We'll need a DNA test, of course, the lawyer said, but given the birthmark and the music box. I sat there, numb, as they discussed me, my identity, my future. William kept looking at me as if afraid I might disappear. I never stopped looking for you, he told me during a pause in the lawyer's questions. I hired private investigators, offered rewards. For years, it was all I did. I wanted to believe him, wanted desperately for this to be real, but years in the foster system had taught me caution. If you were looking for me, I asked, why didn't you find me? I was in the system all this time, right here in the city. It wasn't an accusation, just confusion. William's face darkened. Your mother, she took you across state lines, changed your name. By the time I traced you to the Lawrence shelter, you'd already been placed with a foster family. The records were sealed, and without proof of paternity. He trailed off, and I understood the cruel irony. He'd been searching for me while I'd been searching for him, both of us circling each other without knowing. There was a family that wanted to adopt me when I was 7, I said suddenly, remembering. Something fell through with the paperwork. William nodded grimly. That was my doing. I couldn't prove I was your father, but I could file enough objections to block the adoption. I thought eventually I'd find a way to get you back. I should have been angry. This man had interfered with my chance at a permanent family. But looking at his face, seeing the years of grief etched into the lines around his eyes, I couldn't summon rage. What happened to my mother? I asked instead. William's expression grew guarded. Catherine struggled with depression for years before you were born. After she left with you, she wasn't well. The investigators found evidence that she'd been living in a women's shelter for a while, but then the trail went cold. He hesitated. Emma, there's something else you should know. You have a twin brother, Oliver. The room seemed to spin. A brother? The twin? How could I have lived my entire life without knowing something so fundamental about myself? Where is he? I whispered. He lives with me, William replied. Your mother only took you that night. I never understood why. As we talked, pieces of a scattered puzzle began to form a picture. William showed me photos on his phone. A teenage boy who looked so much like me it was eerie, yet undeniably different. Oliver at graduation, Oliver sailing, Oliver at Christmas. A life parallel to mine but worlds apart. While I'd been moving from foster home to foster home, my twin had been living in luxury, attending private schools, wanting for nothing. I should have felt jealous, but instead, a strange protective feeling washed over me. Had Oliver wondered about me? Had he felt my absence the way I'd always felt something was missing? Does he know about me? I asked. William nodded. He's never stopped asking about you either. In fact, he checked his watch. Oliver's flight lands in an hour. I called him while you were in the restroom. He's cutting his semester abroad short to come home. The DNA results came back a week later, confirming what the birthmark, the music box, and our identical eyes had already told us. I was Emma Richardson, daughter of William Richardson, twin sister of Oliver Richardson. I had a family, a history, a place in the world. Moving into the Richardson mansion felt like stepping into a dream. My bedroom was 3 times the size of my entire apartment, with a window seat overlooking gardens that seemed to stretch forever. The staff treated me with a mixture of curiosity and deference that made me deeply uncomfortable. Each night, I'd find myself sitting on the floor rather than the plush bed, eating cereal straight from the box because the formal dining room intimidated me. Oliver found me like that on my 3rd night, and without a word, he sat down beside me on the carpet and held out his hand for the cereal box. Oliver and I were identical but opposite, like reflections in a funhouse mirror. He was confident where I was cautious, privileged but aware of it, sheltered but not naive. He'd studied my face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. I used to dream about you, he told me that night on the floor. Dad thought I was making it up, that I was just lonely and imagining a sister. But I knew you were out there. I'd laughed, a bit nervously. I didn't even know you existed, I admitted. Oliver had just shrugged. That's okay. I knew enough for both of us. There was something so accepting in his tone, so matter-of-fact about the bond between us, that I felt some of my defenses crumble. Maybe it was okay to believe in this, to let myself hope that this time, this family, would be permanent. William, I still couldn't bring myself to call him Dad, tried so hard to make up for lost time. He bombarded me with gifts, offered to send me to college, suggested therapy, which I actually agreed to, and hovered anxiously whenever we were in the same room. I appreciated his efforts but found them overwhelming. It was Oliver who intervened, pulling his father aside for a conversation I wasn't meant to hear but caught fragments of anyway. You're suffocating her, needs space, not going to disappear again. After that, William made a visible effort to give me breathing room, though I often caught him watching me with a mixture of wonder and lingering fear. One evening he asked if he could show me something, leading me to a room I hadn't entered before. It was a study, walls lined with bookshelves, but what caught my eye was the corkboard covering one entire wall. The board was covered with maps, photographs, sticky notes, printouts, 15 years of searching condensed into a desperate collage. I saw my 3-year-old face smiling from missing posters, saw red pins marking possible sightings across the country, saw handwritten notes detailing dead-end leads and renewed hope. In the center was a photo of my birthmark, enlarged and annotated. You never gave up, I whispered, touching the edge of a faded newspaper article. William stood beside me, hands in his pockets. How could I? He said simply. For the first time since our reunion, I reached for his hand. It was a small gesture, tentative and uncertain, but I felt him exhale shakily as his fingers closed around mine. That night, I took the music box from my still-packed suitcase and placed it on my nightstand. When I wound it up, the familiar melody seemed to belong in this house, as if it had been waiting all this time to return home. My first public appearance as Emma Richardson came about unexpectedly. William had mentioned a charity gala but assured me I didn't need to attend. It's too soon, he'd said. There will be press, questions. But Oliver had grinned mischievously. Or it could be the perfect way to claim your place, he'd countered. Show up, be magnificent, make them all curious but give them nothing. There was something appealing about his approach, facing the inevitable scrutiny on my own terms. So I found myself in a designer dress that cost more than 6 months' rent at my old apartment, being coached by a stylist on how to answer intrusive questions with polite non-answers. "Remember," she advised, "you owe them nothing but courtesy." I repeated this to myself as our car pulled up to the venue, cameras already flashing at the promise of the Richardson family's arrival. The whispers started the moment we entered, a wave of curious glances and hastily exchanged comments. I recognized the exact moment when people realized who I must be. Their eyes would widen, dart between Oliver and me, then quickly look away when caught staring. William stayed close, a protective hand occasionally touching my elbow to guide me through the crowd. Oliver, meanwhile, seemed to delight in the commotion, deliberately introducing me with, "Have you met my twin sister, Emma?" just to watch the shock ripple across faces. I should have been nervous, should have felt like an imposter, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. I'd spent my life being unseen. There was a certain power in being seen too much. Miss Richardson, a woman with a predatory smile, approached, brandishing a recorder, Valerie Simmons from City Life magazine. "Would you care to comment on the rumors that you were kidnapped as a child?" William tensed beside me, but before he could intervene, I smiled back, equally sharp. "I'm afraid I don't read tabloids, Miss Simmons. I've been too busy reconnecting with my family." Oliver snorted with barely suppressed laughter as the reporter blinked in surprise. "But surely the public has a right to know your story," she pressed. I thought about the birthmark on my shoulder, the music box, the years of searching on both sides. "My story belongs to me," I said quietly but firmly, "and to my family. When and if I choose to share it will be my decision." She opened her mouth to protest, but something in my expression made her reconsider. Later that evening, as we were preparing to leave, an elderly woman approached. Unlike the others, she didn't stare or whisper. She simply stood before me, her eyes kind but evaluating. "You have Catherine's chin," she said finally. "But William's eyes, both you and your brother." I realized with a start that this woman had known my mother. "You knew her?" I asked, unable to hide my eagerness. William appeared at my side, his expression softening. "Emma, this is my mother, your grandmother, Eleanor." The woman reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Catherine was troubled," she said directly, "but she loved you very much. Never doubt that." Before I could respond, she pressed something into my palm, a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a crescent moon. "She left this with me, said that someday it should be yours." I closed my fingers around it, feeling the cool metal warm against my skin. Another piece of the puzzle, another connection to the mother I couldn't remember but suddenly felt closer to. The search for answers about my mother became my quiet obsession in the months that followed. While adjusting to my new life, college classes that William insisted on paying for, sessions with a therapist who specialized in trauma and identity issues, learning to navigate the complexities of sudden wealth, I spent hours combing through old photographs and documents. William had preserved everything related to Catherine, from their wedding album to the police reports filed after our disappearance. Oliver joined my investigation, bringing a methodical approach that complemented my more intuitive searching. "She was planning it," he pointed out one rainy afternoon as we spread papers across my bedroom floor. "Look at these bank withdrawals, small amounts over months. She was saving for something." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During a dinner with Eleanor, my grandmother, still a strange concept, she mentioned Catherine's sister. "Your Aunt Rachel was the only one Catherine stayed in touch with, even during the worst times." Neither William nor Oliver had ever mentioned an aunt. When questioned, William looked uncomfortable. "Rachel and I didn't get along. After Catherine left, she blamed me entirely. We haven't spoken in years." A quick internet search revealed Rachel Collins, a therapist specializing in women's issues, practicing just 2 hours away. Without telling William, Oliver and I made the drive the following weekend. The woman who opened the door had Catherine's eyes, my eyes, and her hand flew to her mouth when she saw us standing there. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's like seeing ghosts." Rachel's living room walls were covered with photographs, and there, in the center of a collage, was a picture I recognized, the same one William had shown me that first day in the cafe. Catherine holding me as a toddler, The edge of my birthmark visible. She sent me that after she left, Rachel explained, making tea with shaking hands. She called me that night, hysterical, saying she had to protect you. The mug nearly slipped from my grasp. Protect me? From what? Rachel looked pained. Catherine wasn't well, Emma. She suffered from severe postpartum depression after you and Oliver were born, but it developed into something more serious. She became convinced that William was going to separate you two, send you away. In her mind, taking you was the only way to keep you safe. Oliver and I exchanged glances. But why only me? I asked. Why not both of us? Rachel's answer changed everything. She tried to take both of you. She came to me that night with just you, frantic because she couldn't find Oliver. He'd been sleeping in William's study, he'd fallen asleep there reading, something Catherine didn't know. I tried to process this. My mother hadn't chosen between her children. Chance had separated us. After that night, Catherine's condition worsened, Rachel continued. She couldn't care for you, couldn't even care for herself. When she realized what she'd done, Rachel paused, visibly struggling. She brought you to the shelter because she believed you'd have a better chance at a good life than with her. Her last coherent act was making sure you'd be safe. Tears slid down my cheeks, for the mother I'd never know, for the family fractured by illness and misunderstanding. Rachel reached for my hand. She left something else with me, she said quietly. Letters. One for each of your birthdays until you turned 18. She made me promise to find you someday, to give them to you. The letters changed my understanding of everything. Written in a flowing script that sometimes steadied, sometimes wavered across the pages, they revealed a mother fighting to stay present, to leave something of herself behind for the daughter she couldn't raise. The early ones were heartbreaking in their hope. By the time you read this, maybe I'll be well enough to find you, while the later ones acknowledged a harder reality. Even if we never meet again in this life, know that you were loved completely, perfectly, from the moment you existed. I read them all in one night, curled in my window seat as rain streaked the glass, then read them again more slowly in the days that followed. William asked to see them just once. After reading the first, he handed it back, his face ashen. I didn't know how bad it was for her, he admitted. I was so angry, so focused on finding you, that I never really looked for her. Rachel helped us piece together Catherine's final years. After leaving me at the shelter, she'd checked herself into a psychiatric facility where she'd stayed for nearly a year. Upon release, she'd lived with Rachel briefly before moving to a small apartment of her own. She'd worked in a bookstore, volunteered at a women's crisis center, sent money to Rachel each year on my birthday with instructions to save it for me. She was getting better, Rachel told us. Slowly with setbacks, but better. Catherine had died 5 years ago, a car accident, nothing suspicious, just terrible timing on a rainy night. She'd never tried to contact William or Oliver directly, convinced that she'd severed that connection irrevocably. But she'd left a journal with Rachel, detailing her illness, her regrets, and eventually, her hope that someday her children might understand. With Rachel's blessing, Oliver and I visited Catherine's grave together. It was a simple marker in a peaceful cemetery, with a small crescent moon etched beside her name. We stood there in silence for a long time, this strange mirror image pair, the son who'd grown up knowing one parent, the daughter who'd grown up knowing neither. Do you think she'd be proud of us? I asked finally. Oliver considered this with the thoughtfulness that I'd come to recognize as characteristic of him. I think, he said slowly, she'd be proud of who we're becoming, especially now. We placed white roses on the grave. William had told us they were her favorite, and as we turned to leave, I felt something settle within me. Not closure, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance of my past, my present, and most surprisingly, my future as Emma Richardson. That night, William invited Rachel to dinner at the mansion, the first time she'd been there since before I was born. The tension between them was palpable at first, years of blame and misunderstanding creating a chasm across the dining table. But as the evening progressed, something shifted. Rachel brought photographs of Catherine that William had never seen. William shared stories from their early years together that made Rachel both laugh and cry. Oliver and I watched this tentative reconciliation with a sense of wonder. Later, in the garden, Oliver voiced what I'd been thinking. "We're all orphans, in a way," he observed. "Dad lost Mom and you, I lost Mom and never really knew her, you lost everyone and Rachel lost her sister. But now..." He gestured vaguely toward the house, where William and Rachel were still talking. "Maybe we're all finding each other again." The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, the possibility of a family pieced back together, not perfect but healing. 6 months after that fateful morning in the cafe, I stood before the mirror in what was now unquestionably my bedroom, no longer feeling like a guest in the Richardson mansion. I'd made changes, replacing some of the overly formal furniture with pieces I'd chosen myself, covering one wall with photographs that tracked my journey from foster child to college student to daughter and sister rediscovered. The largest photo, centered above my desk, showed the 4 of us, William, Oliver, Rachel, and me at Thanksgiving, our first holiday together. Not pictured but equally treasured was the small silver music box, which now sat on my nightstand alongside the stack of Catherine's letters, bound with a ribbon. The birthmark on my shoulder, once hidden, I now occasionally displayed with pride, a crescent moon that had helped bring me home. College was challenging but fulfilling. I'd switched my major from business administration, chosen for its practicality, to psychology, inspired partly by Rachel and partly by my own experiences. "You have insight that can't be taught," my advisor had commented after reading my paper on identity formation in transitional living situations. William had insisted on setting up a trust fund for me equal to Oliver's, but I'd negotiated a condition. Half of it would go to establishing a foundation supporting foster children aging out of the system. The Catherine Richardson Foundation was still in its planning stages, but already gathering interest and support. Oliver, unexpectedly, had thrown himself into the project with enthusiasm, putting his business acumen to work alongside my first-hand knowledge of what these young adults truly needed. The Daily Grind Cafe still saw me regularly, though now as a customer rather than an employee. Ellie, my former manager, always greeted me with a hug and refused to let me pay, despite my protests. "Your family here," she'd insist, sliding my cappuccino across the counter. "Besides, your dad bought the building, so technically I work for him now." That had been William's doing. When the cafe had faced closure due to rising rents, he'd quietly purchased the property and reduced the lease terms to something sustainable. He'd claimed it was just good business, but Oliver had rolled his eyes and whispered, "He'd buy the whole block if you asked him to." I was learning to balance my independent spirit with the reality of my father's wealth and influence, accepting help when it made sense, standing firm when it mattered to me. Tonight was the official launch of the foundation, a gala event that would bring together potential donors, social workers, former foster youth like myself, and the politicians whose support we'd need for broader systemic change. My dress, midnight blue with silver accents, had been chosen specifically to complement rather than conceal the crescent birthmark. As I fastened the silver bracelet that had been my mother's around my wrist, a knock came at my door. Oliver entered without waiting for a response, as was his habit. "Ready to change some lives?" he asked, adjusting his tie. William and Rachel waited in the hallway beyond, both looking nervous but determined. I took a final glance in the mirror, at the person I'd become, no longer lost, no longer alone. "Yes," I said, turning toward my family with a smile that matched the crescent on my shoulder. "I've been ready my whole life." What happens when the life you thought you knew shatters and rebuilds itself into something you never imagined possible? Emma's journey from a forgotten foster child to a daughter rediscovered isn't just a story of coincidence. It's a powerful reminder that connections can transcend time, distance, and even the most painful separations. Each of us carries birthmarks of our own, visible or invisible, that connect us to our true identities and the people who are meant to be in our lives. Have you ever felt that inexplicable pull toward someone or something that later proved to be exactly where you belonged? The Richardson family's healing process teaches us that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, to find answers to questions that have haunted us for years. William never stopped searching, Catherine never stopped loving, Oliver never stopped believing, and Emma never lost hope, even when she didn't know what she was hoping for. Their story challenges us all. What would you fight 15 years to find? Who would you never give up on? And what birthmarks, those unique identifiers that make you unmistakably you, are you perhaps hiding when they should be displayed with pride? Life's most meaningful connections often find us when we least expect them, sometimes in something as simple as a coffee cup dropping to the floor or a sleeve slipping at precisely the right moment. The universe has a way of bringing together what belongs together, even after years of separation. Think about the coincidences in your own life. Were they really just chance, or were they guiding you toward the people and purposes you were meant to find? Emma's story invites us all to look more closely at the coincidences that may actually be steering us home. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are thousands of real Emmas out there, children in the foster system searching for connection, belonging, and family. Your support, whether through donation, volunteering, awareness, or simply sharing their stories, can help create more reunions and happy endings. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to hear more powerful stories of lost connections found, families rebuilt, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Like this video if Emma's journey moved you, and comment below with your own stories of unexpected reunions or the birthmarks, physical or emotional, that make your journey unique. Remember, sometimes the family we're meant to have is out there looking for us too.